All right, it's time for my Penn State 2023 season preview. My name is Connor Griffin, just an excited Penn State fan who wanted to talk about this upcoming Penn State football season. It is the most excited that I have ever been for Penn State football in my lifetime. I've expressed this before, do want to go into sports broadcasting, do want to get some reps in because I have not done anything like this in a while where I'm on camera, let alone with fancy microphone and headphones and everything. I have not talked about sports in this type of medium in a very, very long time. So I wanted to shake the rust off a little bit. But we'll talk about position groups, position group by position group. We'll talk about the schedule. We'll talk about the coaching staff. And then ultimately, at the end of the video, I will get to my predictions and my overall expectations for this year for Penn State football. It's going to be a big year, and I am incredibly excited. I did put out on my Instagram story a couple days ago, though. I said, hey, going to try and do this preview podcast or video, whatever you want to call it. If anybody has questions or topics they want me to discuss, feel free to drop them in my DMs. I maybe got like 10 replies, as expected. But one of them was my friend Peyton. She says, what makes you qualified to do this? Nothing, really. Nothing at all. Again, I'm just an excited fan who wants to get on here and talk about some Penn State football. So we're going to do just that. And out of those 10 replies that I got, maybe 7 or 8 of them were about Drew Allar. So we will talk about Drew Allar to get this video started off. How about that? Everybody is placing the savior narrative on Drew Allar, saying, oh, he's the chosen one and the prince who was promised. It's unnecessary. It's unnecessary. Also, the people saying he's a dark horse for the Heisman. Come on. I'm not discounting anything about Drew Allar. I'm not discounting his accolades, just overall his physique, his natural God-given ability. It's all superstar level good. But he's not Christian Hackenberg. Like, he does not need to come into this program and literally save the program like a guy like Christian Hackenberg had to do, where the entire weight of Penn State football was on his shoulders. What did he have? 5 scholarship offensive linemen? Drew Allar is coming in here with a great offensive line, with a great running game, with a great defense, could be one of the best defenses in the country. He's going to be just fine. I think in general, the big difference that will separate him from Clifford, and honestly, I talked to some people about this before. He does not need to be light years ahead of Sean Clifford. If he's just marginally better than Sean Clifford, what Sean Clifford was last year, this team's going to be more than fine. But I think the thing that will separate him, and we saw it in the Rose Bowl, where, I mean, that was by far Sean Clifford's best game, by a mile, the best game of his career. Sean Clifford had 3 or 4 plays in that game where I sat back and I thought to myself, that was Sean Clifford? There's no way he just made that pass. There's no way he just ran to his left to avoid the sack, and as he's on the run, leaning towards the sideline, he throws a dart to Keandre Lambert-Smith on a huge third down conversion. Like, he had a couple plays in that game where they might seem kind of trivial, but they changed the trajectory of the game. That third down play I was just talking about, I viewed that as the play of the game. We wound up scoring on that drive, as opposed to giving Utah the ball back with great field position in a game where we were largely losing the field position battle. It changes the complexity of the game. And again, it was so noteworthy what Sean Clifford was doing because we have not been able to see Sean Clifford do that a whole lot. These windows, he was fitting these passes, and it was unbelievable. It will not be noteworthy with a guy like Drew Allar. At least I think. That's the hope. Those 3 or 4 plays a game ultimately will become commonplace with a guy like Allar. It's not just going to be, the final game of his career where he's leaving it all out there on the field. I think that's going to be a natural occurrence where you're going to sit back and think, wow, that was a hell of a play. And then you look back at the course of the game, you say, actually, that play changed everything. Those types of plays, whether it's, fitting it into a tight window, lofting a perfect pass 30 yards downfield, right on the money. That type of stuff. Drew Allar, let's face it, just has more natural talent than a guy like Sean Clifford does. It will show, and I think it's going to really help this football team. Sean Clifford, you do have to give him credit, though. His intellect, his leadership, everything he did pre-snap, getting everybody lined up at the line of scrimmage properly, you cannot replicate that as a first-year starter. It's going to take Drew Allar some time to gain that level of intelligence, that level of recognition. You're just not going to have that like Sean Clifford, who started for 4 years, had. But once the ball was snapped, I would never say that Sean Clifford was a dynamic playmaker, except for in the Rose Bowl, where I was like, oh, wow, if he had been doing that his entire career, we'd be having a very different conversation about Sean Clifford. I do think Drew Allar will be a dynamic player post-snap. Play breaks down. What do you do? going through progressions, having to fit the ball in this tight window right here. That type of stuff, again, going back to those 3 or 4 plays, it's going to be a natural occurrence for Drew Allar, whereas it was a struggle for Sean Clifford to figure out what to do in those types of situations. So that's where I think another main difference lies. And you also have to keep in mind, Drew Allar is Mike Yursic's guy. This is like his child. Mike Yursich was on Drew Allar in the recruiting trail well before any other coach was. I think it was when Drew Allar was a 3-star recruit. This is when Mike Yursich was at Texas. He gets the job at Penn State. Drew Allar says, okay, yeah, I want to check out what Coach Yursich is up to at Penn State. Says, yeah, I'll come here. We don't have, likely, Drew Allar without Mike Yursich. This has been coming for a while, where I think Yursich has been very much looking forward to finally getting Drew Allar, even though it could be Bo Prabula. It could be Bo, because it's still an open quarterback competition at the time that we record this. If it's Bo, then that's a major problem. It's a major problem if it's not Drew Allar. But point being, Yursich, Allar, this is what they've been looking forward to for a very, very long time. And I think you will start to see more of what made Yursich's offense special at Oklahoma State, for example, incorporated into this Penn State offense this year. I remember when Yursich got here in 2021, granted, we didn't have a running game, which made things very difficult. The offensive line was not great. But I thought to myself, this is very boring. This is a very boring offense. Where's the air raid concepts that he was doing with Mason Rudolph? Where's this big play explosiveness? We had none of it. 2022, last year, we get a little bit better in that regard, and mainly we have a solid running game that helped out a ton, and we were primarily a running team. I think this year we're still going to be a running football team, but you will be able to see a lot more of those big play, downfield shots incorporated, because I think Yursich, he won't say this obviously, and Franklin, they were limited by the physical ability of Sean Clifford. They will not be limited by Drew Allar. Drew Allar has every single tangible attribute that you would want out of a Big Ten quarterback playing at this high of a level in college football. Like, he's going to be fine. And Mike Yursich, I think, is just, his mind must be running crazy with all that he could do with Drew Allar back there at the helm. So very much looking forward to seeing what Drew Allar is going to do. Again, he's not the savior. Let's calm down a little bit. Dark horse Heisman, all this talk. Let's relax. I am just excited to see him as you are, but let's calm down with those narratives. Like I said, part of the reason why he doesn't have to be the savior is because he's got a great pair of running backs, which, can we talk about how much disrespect Kaytron Allen has been getting this entire offseason? What the hell are we doing? Why aren't we talking about Kaytron Allen? I mean, had over 850 yards on the ground, had 10 touchdowns compared to Nick Singleton's 12. They were fairly close in that regard. And I think he also had 5.2 yards a carry. Why are we talking about Nick Singleton almost exclusively and not about Kaytron Allen? I get it. Nick Singleton has the flashy plays. He's running for 87 yards in the Rose Bowl. He's got the speed. He's got just the explosiveness, unlike maybe any other back in college football right now. But Kaytron Allen is damn good. In many ways, I believe Kaytron Allen is a better pure 4-down running back than Nick Singleton in many ways. There were plenty of times last season where I'm thinking to myself, okay, why is Singleton in the game right now? I know that he has the ability, as Franklin always says, to rip 70 yards on a play. But we'd go through drives where I'm like, okay, we don't situationally need that big play right now. We need to chew clock. We need to make sure that we're keeping our defense on the field, or pardon me, off the field, so they could get some rest. Like, let's get Kaytron in there. I think Kaytron, in terms of his strength, in terms of his vision at the line of scrimmage, which is criminally underrated, is an incredible back. And obviously he doesn't have the speed like Nick Singleton does, but my God, he's got some burst, dude, and he's got some shiftiness. He reminds me a lot of a better version of 2019 Noah Cain. Before the injuries, obviously his career was never the same after 2019. But Noah Cain, the thing that I loved about him was the fact that he was always falling forward. He was never falling back. If you went to tackle Noah Cain, he was getting another yard or two as he fell down to the ground. That's Kaytron Allen, dude. He's got so much strength, and I love everything about his game, and I can't wait to see him come into the season with a chip on his shoulder. But regardless, we talk about Kaytron Allen, and obviously I'm praising him a lot. You can't take away, obviously, from what Nick Singleton has done. It's naturally people are going to talk about him. I get it, but it does pissed me off a little bit to see that Katron Allen is just kind of flying under the radar. What? They're the only duo in Big Ten history that have been freshmen, each with 700 yards in a year, and we're only talking about one of them. Doesn't make any sense to me. But Nick Singleton, from all reports, saying that he's gotten stronger, saying that he's gotten faster. It's going to be very exciting to see these two. The first T formation of the season. I might be at the game. I might be at the West Virginia game, and I'm assuming we'd break it out right away. It is going to be a scene. It's going to be an absolute scene. I will be making a scene if it isn't. I can't wait to see those two. Also, Trey Potts, slept on addition in the offseason. This is a running back room. Last year, Devin Ford says that he's out for the season, taking time away from the program, and then he ultimately transfers to Notre Dame. Kevon Lee in the offseason, he's off to Mississippi State, transfers. Yeah, we have two great backs, but we needed some more depth after that, and bringing in Trey Potts from Minnesota, I think he's going to contribute. I think he's going to be a key factor in the offense, and I'm excited to see what he brings to the table. So that's pretty much all I got with the running backs. I do hope that they could become more of a threat in the passing game out of the backfield. That was a big emphasis for Saquon Barkley going into his second, third year, same for Miles Sanders. I'd be shocked if they weren't in training camp right now preaching more catching the ball out of the backfield, practicing that type of stuff. That is really the one area where both of them can improve. And if that's the case, if they do find a way to improve there, they're going to be spectacular again. Wide receivers, people are talking about and are not as confident in. Rightfully so. It's the first year that I can remember where we really have no idea who the number one guy is going to be. And it's mainly because I don't trust Keandre Lambert-Smith fully yet. Been here now playing for 2 years. Not like he hasn't had chances. He just hasn't been consistent enough. And I don't know if he can be consistent enough. I'm not sure. I do think, while I am kind of concerned, okay, who's going to be the lead guy? Is this group going to be able to muster up accumulatively a solid year of production? I'm not scared. I'm a little bit worried, not scared, because for the first time in a while, we actually do have some size in the receiver room. For whatever reason, and it might have been part of the reason why we got rid of Stubblefield, we have recruited largely like slot guys. I love Parker Washington. Sorry, these headphones are messing me up a little bit. I love Parker Washington. He was a great receiver. Should never have been our number one option. The fact that he was our number one receiver last year was outrageous. He's a slot guy. We need people with size who can go up and get it in those 50-50 balls, like a Deshaun Hamilton, like a Chris Godwin, like a Saeed Blacknall. I take a Saeed Blacknall over a guy like Keandre Lambert-Smith. We now finally have some size back after, we've been recruiting these really undersized receivers. Even Jahan Dotson, who obviously I love and wound up being a first-round draft pick, he was undersized. We have Malik McClain coming in. We have Dante Cephas. And I think, unfortunately, because we really don't have any idea what Cephas is going to bring to the table, he's kind of in that adjustment period of training camp where people want to know, like, how's he doing? We don't know how he's doing. I think it's going to rely heavily on him, the overall success of this receiver room. Very similar to how a lot of the success last year in the receiver room depended on Mitchell Tinsley. Mitchell Tinsley, under the radar, might have been the MVP of the offense last year. Wound up leading the team in receptions, close to receiving yards, too. Parker Washington had him edged out a little bit, but also tied for the lead in receiving touchdowns. Like, he caught everything that came his way. He was an incredibly solid receiver. And I do think a guy like Cephas, again, somebody we just grabbed out of the transfer portal, hoping to fill a void in the receiver room, I think it's going to come down to the success of him. And he's got the length, he's got the speed, got the physicality. I'm very, very interested to see how it goes in the early on. If it does take a little bit for him to adjust in the Big Ten play, obviously playing in Beaver Stadium is its own thing. But if he is able to produce in an efficient manner, then I do think that this wide receiver room is going to be just fine. Plus, they have Drew throwing to him. That changes things completely compared to a guy like Sean Clifford. I remember in the Rose Bowl back in it was played in 2017 to 2016 season, there was a line, I think it was from Herb Street, where he said, talking about Sam Darnold, there are some quarterbacks who throw to open receivers than there are quarterbacks who throw to get you open. And Sam Darnold was one of those quarterbacks. I think Drew will be one of those quarterbacks as well. I think he'll help out the receiver room a lot. And also got to talk about the tight ends. I think that was pretty much all I wanted to talk about with the receivers. Yeah, that's pretty much it. We'll talk about tight ends. Could be one of the best tight end rooms in the country, and they are going to play a pivotal role in the passing game. I remember last year in the Minnesota game, that whiteout, we stunk as an offense in the first quarter. And then all of a sudden we start utilizing guys like Theo Johnson and Tyler Warren. They're having these huge chunk plays across the middle of the field, and the offense completely changed. They unlock different avenues for us as an offense. Not only that, they block. I love Mike Gesicki. He was amazing. Couldn't block worth a damn. These are all-around complete tight ends. Like I said, I think they could be among the best in the country. James Franklin thinks the same as well. Very excited to see what Theo Johnson can do. Obviously, Brenton Strange was a big part of that group last year off to the NFL. It is now Theo Johnson on him to be the guy. Also, Khalil Dinkins, people have said, has been really impressive in fall camp, summer camp. So I'm really excited to see what that group can do, and I do think they're going to help out the receivers a lot. They'll be able to alleviate so much of the stress that is already on the receivers because obviously people are just nonstop talking about the receivers as an area maybe of weakness. So very excited to see what the tight ends do. Related to that, we'll just go O-line. We'll talk about the O-line right now. This is the best offensive line by a mile that James Franklin has ever had. Obviously, when he got here, the sanctions were in full effect. Like I said earlier, 5 scholarship offensive linemen. We go through Lime Grover. He can't really turn things around. We bring in Troutwine. Troutwine, a little bit shaky at first. Now he's going out. He's landing these top-notch recruits. We're going to Wisconsin and getting offensive linemen, and they're coming into the program, and they are producing on a very high level. Obviously, Olu Fashanu, going to be the highest draft prospect since Levi Brown in 2007. He's going to lead an offensive line that's got a lot of experience. I think we have 6 players who started at least 5 games last year. When was the last time we had something like that? They're all going to be a pivotal part in this offense and to this team because for the first time, I think you can legitimately say Penn State football, one of their strengths is the offensive line. You could say it maybe a little bit, particularly towards the back half of last season. But, man, this season, assuming everybody stays healthy, they could be legit. One of the best in the conference. I don't think you're top in Michigan. But I am extremely, extremely confident in this group, and they are going to help this team out tremendously. So I'm pretty sure that's pretty much all I had to say about the O-line. Pretty much all I had to say about the offense in general. We'll move on to defense. And I know this kind of has taken way too long, so we'll make the defense semi-brief. I'll start off with my areas of concern. Again, things I'm not panicking about, stuff that, question marks that I have. D-tackle, as a lot of people have said, obviously losing a guy like P.J. Mustipher, you got to fill a huge void. I don't think we have a guy or multiple guys to do it. We might be a little bit soft in the middle part of the line, but people are using that as fuel for why we won't beat a team like Michigan. Well, Michigan ran for, over 400 yards against us last year, even with P.J. Mustipher in the game. So I don't think that, P.J. Mustipher, having a strong defensive tackle, somebody in there who's big and bulky and can clog things up, I don't think that's the reason why we're not going to beat Michigan this year, because we don't have one of those guys. I'll get to that in a second, though. I'm not freaking out about it for that very reason, because mainly the rest of the defensive line is going to be so good. It's unbelievable. I mean, obviously, edge rushers, we could talk about those all day. Chop Robinson has been talked about nonstop in the preseason. Adisa Isaac obviously struggled with a lot of injuries early on in his career at Penn State. Silently, I would say, had a really good year last year, but he still is a little bit too finesse, in my opinion. I would like him to get some more of that physicality. Also, this is a general thing for the entire defense, but we have seen it a lot on the defensive line. We saw it with Odafe Owe, who wound up being a first-round draft pick. We have these guys who are freaks. Freaks of nature, these physical specimens, and they test incredibly well at the combine. Their measurables are great. Their pro days are great, and they wind up becoming these big-time prospects in the draft. Obviously, like I said, Odafe Owe went first round. But I look back at their career at Penn State and I think to myself, okay, we developed them well for the draft, but did we develop them well enough so they could produce for us while we had them here in the building? That's my biggest area of concern, because they wind up having these great years in the NFL, pretty successful, long tenures. And I'm thinking to myself, well, their production in the NFL does not match their production when we had them here at Penn State. So can we maximize the development, yes, for the NFL, but for having them here at Penn State and making sure that we're getting that type of production in their 3 years, 4 years, however long they're here in the building. So that's one of the things that I'm really focused on for the defense this year. You're already starting to see those guys start to come to form. It's not just that we have these monsters of athletes, and yeah, they'll eventually turn out to be good later down the road. No, we know they're good right now, and they are producing at a high level. I do think Adisa Isaac can take a real big step this year, especially having Chop on the opposite side of the ball, the opposite side of the line, and I'm really excited to see what he does. Also, in terms of weakness, I would say linebacker, middle linebacker, Kobe King, Tyler Elsdon. Maybe just because they're right next to Curtis Jacobs and Abdul Carter. I don't know. But I do worry about them a little bit. I think ultimately, though, with how many other playmakers are on the field, we'll be just fine. Like I said, Curtis Jacobs deciding to return for a senior season really set the tone, I would say. And that was one of the first signs where you thought to yourself, oh, yeah, players know. Like, this year is going to be the year. They don't want to go to the NFL right now when they could, okay, yeah, I could be a 5th or 6th round pick. They want to come back, they want to win, and they want to wrap up some unfinished business and then improve their draft stock, get a better pick in the draft. Curtis Jacobs, huge get, him coming back. Abdul Carter, I think, could be one of the best linebackers, if not the best linebacker in college football. Progression-wise, he is better than Micah Parsons was at this stage of Micah Parsons' career. The development of him has sped along way faster. He's gotten way more reps, and it is going to be frightening to see what he does on the field this year. Then you look at the secondary as a whole, the DBs, corner, safeties. Even though we lose a guy like Jair Brown, who, by the way, I believe we led the conference in sacks last year, 4.5 of those sacks came from Jair Brown at safety. He was all over the football field, obviously great on the back end, great commanding that defense at the safety position, but he was flying into the backfield to swarm the quarterback, to get to the rusher, tackles for loss, everything. He was just all around. One of the best safeties that we've ever had in Penn State program history. It's going to be very tough to fill the void of him leaving, but I still think, and Joey Porter Jr. too, I forgot about him, maybe the best corner that we've had in years. I still think even with both of their departures, this secondary can be one of the best secondaries in the country. It's astounding. Kalen King in coverage, I don't know who else is going to be topping him in college football this year. Also, you have Johnny Dixon on the opposite side, who I wouldn't want to test him either. And then safety, Keaton Ellis, been around for a long time. We've been waiting for him to kind of take that next step, apparently, based off of what James Franklin has said in the preseason. He is at a point in practice where he's making plays. He's becoming dynamic in that aspect. Jalen Reed, Zakee Wheatley, who really splashed onto the scene last year, had a really, Auburn game. The Auburn game, and then I think it was maybe Michigan State. He played phenomenal and was causing turnovers, picks, fumbles, everything. I'm incredibly confident in that unit, and I think this defense as a whole, manned by Manny Diaz, is going to be a juggernaut. It's a true sign of a football team, how excited you are for the football team, when not only are you excited to watch the offense, you might be even more excited to watch the defense. These guys are going to be flying all over the field, getting after it. Manny Diaz, obviously very aggressive, much more aggressive play caller than Brent Pry ever was, and he's got the dudes now to back it up. Not saying he didn't have it last year. He just has more dudes this year, and it's going to be an incredibly fun ride. Also, Denai Dennis Sutton, who I forgot about. Denai, I thought, played some really good football on the limited reps that he got last year. This is a former 5-star recruit. Hopefully going to take that next step. Could burst onto the scene, very similar to how Micah Parsons kind of burst on. I don't know. That's a little bit too much expectations, but he is the one guy on this defense who I say, yeah, he hasn't really been talked about a whole lot, but he was a major signing. Everybody was talking about him when he was in high school. And now that he's been in the program for a little bit, he's been here for, a year and a half, 2 years. He's gotten a sense of how things go. He's gotten stronger. He's gotten more of a recognition of the game, and I think that he's going to have a phenomenal year. So that would be my one prediction for the defense, but just in general, a general prediction is I think this is going to be one of the best defenses in the country. Very excited about all of that. And just to recap, offense, one of the best running back duos in the country. They're not going to top Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, of course. They are the standard, but they could be close. I'd say one of the best offensive lines in the Big Ten, one of the best tight end groups in the country. Defensively, you'll have some of the best edge rushers in the country. You'll have maybe the best linebacker in the country, and I think one of the best secondaries in the country. This is going to be a hell of a year. This is going to be just an absurd year. The amount of dogs that are on this team right now, it's unbelievable, and we are in store for a hell of a ride. So let's get to the ride. We'll get to the ride real fast. We'll get to the schedule. Hopefully I'm not boring you guys so far. Let me just flip my paper over here. Oh, one thing I have to talk about, special teams. And that is so indicative of how this entire preseason has been. Nobody's talking about special teams. It still is, and that's my bad. I apologize. Still is one of the three main parts of the game. It is a focus. It does matter. And we have to replace everybody. We brought in 2 transfers, most likely going to fill in at kicker and punter. I hope it turns out okay. That is, if you want to point to, why Penn State isn't going to be good this year, or why Penn State is going to fall short again, or maybe, concerns or worries, point to special teams. I think they're going to be fine. The 2 guys we brought in do have a good resume behind them, but you never know. So that is an area of concern that I do want to air out there right now. Be on the lookout for special teams, because that's definitely something that I'm going to be keeping an eye on early on in the season. But we'll get to the season in general, the schedule. Game 1, West Virginia. A game, I think I might have said it before. I might be at that game, very excited. We're going to blow them out the water. This is going to be an absolute rout. They play no defense. I think they were 98th in total defense last year, even worse in scoring defense. They play no defense. They're small. They're going to be crapping their pants coming into Happy Valley come September 2nd. We win that game, I say easily. I'd say maybe by 3 or 4 touchdowns. I'm expecting a blowout in that game. Then Delaware, another blowout. Then at Illinois, once again, of course, starting the season on the road in the Big Ten. Makes sense. This is a game I'm scared of. I am worried for this game. First Big Ten game. It's a noon kick in Champaign, Illinois. It's going to be 11 a.m. Central Time. Crowd's going to be dead. There's going to be no juice. The only juice I can think of is the fact that they beat us in 2021 in that horrendous 9 overtime game, which still haunts me to this day. I was in the back of the end zone where that final 2-point conversion was scored to beat us. I'll never forget that image. I'm definitely thinking of that game going into this, but a lot of the players had nothing to do with that team, so I don't think that they would care about it. But you look at Illinois, they obviously have been a thorn in our side before. We're going into their house, again, lousy environment. They did win 8 wins, or pardon me, they won 8 games last year, and they do have to replace a guy like Chase Brown, which is, clearly no easy task. But defensively, did you know that they were the best scoring defense in the country last year? Only allowed 12.8 points a game, and they return so many of their guys on that side of the ball. So it's going to be a tough game. I'm not overlooking that game at all. At all. You got to take that game seriously if you're Penn State, and I obviously think that they will. But be on the lookout for that. Illinois, week 3 on the road in Champaign. I think we win it, but it might be a little bit tougher than a lot of people expect. Then we come home, Iowa. We're not losing the whiteout. We're not losing the whiteout. And I talked about 2021, how personally I'm thinking about the Illinois game from 2021. I want revenge for that. I especially want revenge against Iowa. And there, I do think Franklin is going to run up the score if we pull away with it. I think he's going to be so petty. I think he's not going to care at all. There are moments, maybe like once every 1 or 2 years, where that petty Franklin comes out. This is absolutely going to be petty Franklin. If we have a lead in that game, he's not taking the foot off the gas at all. Based on what they did in 2021, disastrous game where we're up 17-3 in their house. It's the number 3 team in the country versus us number 4, dominating the game. Then Sean Clifford goes down with an injury. P.J. Mustipher goes down with an injury. The fans are booing our injured players. Yeah, Franklin's running the score up in that one. We're not losing that game. So that's Iowa. Then we go on the road to Northwestern, maybe a game I'll get to. It's, 30 minutes away here in Chicago. They're the worst team in the conference. Even before all this stuff with Pat Fitzgerald went down, firing him, and now they have a new coach in there, they're going to be a dumpster fire this year. And that game starts a very fortunate chain of events for Penn State, in my opinion, because you have that, what should be a layup of a game. Then you have a bye week. Then you play UMass. And then you play Ohio State. So you have a cupcake, a bye week, and then an even worse cupcake before you play one of the toughest opponents on your schedule. That is a godsend. I don't know how the scheduling worked out like that, but and I'll get to that later. The schedule this year is perfect. Absolutely perfect. So Northwestern will be a W. Also, part of the reason why it helps having UMass after the bye, people like to crap on Franklin all the time. If you're going to point out critiques or flaws of Franklin's tenure at Penn State, why doesn't anybody talk about the fact that he's 2-6 after a bye? Hasn't won a game off a bye week since 2017? Talk about that. That is legitimate. That is an actual reason why Franklin stinks. People say, oh, he's a good recruiter. He's not a good coach on the field. Okay, well, point to evidence that shows you that he's not a good coach on game day. Show me specifically. Oh, no, I don't need to. He's a good recruiter, sure. He's a used car salesman. I'm giving you fuel. I'm giving you the argument why James Franklin might not be a good head coach. I mean, doesn't do well off of a bye week. It goes to his preparation. It goes to how well he conducts the team and the operation of everything. It does matter significantly. Has not been able to win off of bye weeks, traditionally speaking. And it's not just because, we go straight from the bye week into playing Ohio State or Michigan. This year, that was the case, even though we were only slight underdogs going into that Michigan game, and we wound up getting the brakes beaten off of us. That was all coaching. That was all preparation. But going to 2021, I brought up the Illinois game, the 9 overtime game. That was off of a bye week. 2020, we didn't have one because of the COVID year. 2019, though, we're the number 4 team in the country. We go on the road to play Minnesota, maybe the best Minnesota team in history, but still a game that we should have won. Wound up making a bunch of mistakes. The game plan wasn't good. We lost that one. 2018, we lose to Ohio State by 1 point in the whiteout, and we're thinking to ourselves, okay, yeah, we shouldn't have lost that game. But we're a solid team. I mean, we hung around with Ohio State, and many times we were ahead in that game, and the better team, we're going to be just fine the rest of the way. We go into the bye week right after that. We come out against Michigan State at home, not a good Michigan State team, and we lose that one. I think we put up 17 points in that game. You have to go back to 2017. That was the last time that we won after a bye week. So getting back to this schedule, UMass after the bye week is great. It's almost like a scrimmage to get back into the rhythm of things. It's actually, I checked, it's the latest in the season that we have played an out-of-conference opponent since 2007. What was it? I think I marked it down right here. We played Temple in November of 2007. And it's a cupcake. So it works out perfectly. Get the rhythm back going again. And then we go into Columbus. And we'll talk about this right now. It's going to be a next couple minutes. We're talking about this game. I tweeted out months ago, Penn State is going to go into the Horseshoe in October of 2023, and they are going to beat the Ohio State Buckeyes. Ohio State is no longer what they have been. I'm not saying they're, going to be non-existent. Obviously, that's not true. They're a top 5 team in the country. But they are no longer the bullies of the conference, and the gap between us and them is marginal. Very, very, very thin. Think about it. The game last year, actually, we'll just run through the entire list of games that we played against them in recent years, because keep in mind, before Michigan really came to prominence 2 years ago, we were always Ohio State's toughest opponent. Going back to 2016 when we beat them, 2017, we lose by 1 point on their turf, and then 2018, they come to our turf, they beat us by 1 point, again, a game where we led for the majority of the time. Same thing goes for 2017. We led for the entirety of that game leading up to JT Barrett and his incredible drive in the fourth quarter. So 2017, 2018, both 1 point losses. 2019, I would say, was the best Ohio State team that was ever rolled out under Ryan Day or Urban Meyer. That was Justin Fields, J.K. Dobbins, Chase Young. We were their toughest competition all year. Same goes for 2020, toughest competition all year, despite being in the COVID year where we wound up being 4-5. That game was 38-25, still covered, I believe. And then 2021 covered there too on their turf, and that was a year again where we were not good, but we wound up sticking around, making that a game. And then last year, we were the better team for 51 minutes of the game. And then the final 9 minutes, we got outscored 28-10 because Ohio State went on a burst unlike anything I've ever seen before. But they could not run the football for the vast majority of that game. It wasn't until Travion Henderson in that 9-minute stretch to end the game had a 41-yard touchdown where they finally broke loose. They had 98 yards on the day, and 41 of them came from that one run. They could not run the football at all. Their offensive line just isn't built for it. And the offensive line is another question mark, another concern coming into this season. Also, not to mention, we were getting after C.J. Stroud. Now they have Kyle McCord getting in there. That's automatically a drop-off, assuming he wins the position. We don't know that yet. But they've downgraded at quarterback. Running backs, they're just as good as they were last year, but they still don't have that great of an offensive line. Obviously, wide receiver, best skill group in the country in terms of how loaded that receiver room is. But defensively, their secondary is unproven. They have a lot of guys who are going to be thrown in there. They're very high on Denzel Burke, and I think he could be really good. But they have a lot of guys who are going to be thrown in there, and I just don't know if they're going to be able to play at a high level similar to how our secondary plays. We could have our way with them. We could. Listen, like I said, the gap is marginal. It was not a fluke that we were up 21-16 in the fourth quarter of that game last year. We were the better team in that game until the final 9 minutes, and obviously how you end the game is the only thing that matters. I'm not saying that we deserve to win that game. Ohio State deserved to win it, but for over 3 quarters, we were in the driver's seat. So that definitely had to be said. They have holes. They have definitive holes where I do think we as an overall program don't have many holes right now. This is the biggest and baddest roster that we've ever had. The depth is incredible. The talent is incredible. And I don't think we're going to fear going into the horseshoe. I also think Drew Allar, again, in games like that, it's one of the first times where we could say going up against an Ohio State or a Michigan or any of these elite programs, we have an advantage at quarterback. I love Sean Clifford, but him going up against Justin Fields has us beat. Drew Allar getting in there against Kyle McCord, I take that. I take that fight, that battle. I take that 9 times out of 10. So very excited for that game. I do think if we are going to split one of the two, Ohio State or Michigan, it's the Ohio State game where we have the higher likelihood of winning. So we win that one. That is my prediction. I'm going to call that right now. Indiana, we then go to I would take that back. They come to our place. They're in a really turbulent transition period where they've had a lot of turnover on the roster. I don't think they're going to be that great this year, and I think that we will definitely have our way with them. They're 6-18 in the last 2 years. They have not been that great. I do think eventually, they'll turn it around, but in terms of this year coming to Happy Valley, they're not beating us. So that'll be another win. Another game that I think is going to be more difficult than people believe, at Maryland. They still have Talia Tagovailoa, which is crazy. He's like the Sean Clifford of their program. He's been around forever. So he's coming back for his senior season. They also, their coaching staff, they changed dramatically. Offensively, they brought in Josh Gaddis, a very familiar face for Penn State fans. And they also brought in Kevin Sumlin to be associate head coach and co-offensive coordinator. So their offense is going to have a little bit of a different genetic makeup. And their defense, they have completely revamped. So I do think they're going to be better than last year. I actually think that they're going to be, outside of us and Ohio State and Michigan, the next best team in the conference. I think they're going to finish 4th in the Big Ten East. I take that back. I wouldn't say definitively that they'll be the next best team in the conference. They'll definitely be the next best team in the division, though. That is my prediction right now. That's a trap game. It comes a week before Michigan, and especially if we're undefeated and we're looking ahead to the Michigan game as potentially the game of the year in college football, Maryland might take advantage of that. So obviously it's one of those classic trap games you got to keep in the back of your mind. Like, this could go wrong for us. Then we get to Michigan. Could be the game of the year in college football. if we're both undefeated in that game going into Beaver, like, it's going to be absolutely electric. I'm pissed it's not the whiteout, as I've tweeted out before, but politics, TV networks, obviously it gets in the way of everything. This is going to be incredible. And I know people like to focus on last year, and I touched on this briefly talking about PJ Mustafer and the D-tackle position and everything. People say repetitively how much we got manhandled by Michigan last year. And while the score was close at halftime, I think it was 17-16, somewhere around there, and for a little bit of the second half, we were in it. That game was not close. That could have been way more than a 24-point loss. I don't even know why Michigan was passing the ball. They were just running it down our throats. So I get why people say we were manhandled. I get why people say we can't match up with them physically. But for the Bloggy, which I'm sure some of you have watched, they put out a film breakdown. And I'm not a film guy. I didn't play high school football. I didn't play college football. I never played football at a high level. So I try not to get into X's and O's because I don't want to sound stupid. But for the Bloggy broke it down. And they made a really good point. It wasn't so much that they just had bigger bodies and were more physically imposing and had their way with us. It was more so the fact that we just did a terrible job of preparing for all of the gaps that they create as an offense in their running game. What is it called? Bringing people to the party. There would be 9 gaps. That's an absurd amount. There'd be 6 gaps created by the Michigan offense, and we would only bring 4 people to the party. Well, obviously, that leaves 2 gaps open. So Donovan Edwards or Blake Corum, they could just find one of those gaps, one of those seams in the line, and they could scamper for 10 yards before they're even touched. Like, it was consistently happening in that game. And you watch the breakdown of it, you're like, oh my God, yeah. There are all these gaps that aren't being filled. And it's no wonder why, yeah, they're having all the success on the ground. It wasn't like we were being tossed around. We just were not bringing enough people to the line of scrimmage, and they were able to just do whatever they wanted. Again, I don't even know why they were passing the ball. And we made 0 adjustments. It was funny. I was listening to Adam Brenneman interview Manny Diaz, and Manny Diaz even said it the other day, where he was talking about, how do we clog up gaps? How do we bring enough personnel in to make sure that we're not letting anybody through the seams? I think he was partially saying that because of what happened with the Michigan game. That, if I were a coach, would haunt me. Because, again, I don't think it was the players. I think it was coaching. I think we were completely unprepared for what Michigan was throwing at us. And we were not expecting that many blockers. We weren't expecting that many holes. And they were able to just get through our defense with no problem. No problem whatsoever. I think what you'll see this year is a completely different game plan. We'll have adjustments. We'll be able to combat that, unlike last year where we just made 0 tweaks whatsoever over the course of the game. And you'll see a different type of complexity to that ball game. When you look at the offenses, they are very similar in the sense that both have 2 great running backs. Both have really solid offensive lines. The running backs for Michigan and the offensive line for Michigan, both better than ours. But they both get great tight end play. I think we have a little bit of an advantage in that regard. And if you had to point to a weakness, it's receiver. And then when it comes to the quarterbacks, J.J. McCarthy struggled at times, but he has proven that he can win games on his own. I do think, though, Drew Allar could be the better quarterback. So it's going to be very even offensively. The question just comes down to, defense. I do think it's going to be a very defensive struggle. And the thing with this series that's been very interesting, people like to use the previous year as justification for why this team is going to win or that team is going to win. Clearly, if you're looking at last year, you'd think, okay, Penn State's not even going to be able to hang around in that game. Also, Michigan is going to be, I think, even better than what they were last year. They've added so many transfers, and they really bulked up their roster. It's a great roster. But look at this series over time. 2016, they beat us 49-10. 2017, we come out, we beat them 42-13. Thump them. 2018, they beat us 42-7. Then the next 2 years, we win. Next 2 years after that, they win. It's very back and forth, topsy-turvy. So anything could happen. Naturally, the pendulum indicates that we'll be the ones winning this game. But I do think, like I said, this is the game compared to Ohio State, where we'll have less probability of winning. Like I said, I just think that Michigan is way too good, but you never know. They're better on paper than us. They've obviously been the better team for the past 2 years, but all it takes is one game. All it takes is one game, and that's the beauty of it. This is not a 7-game series. It's one game. You may not be the better team, but on that day, you might have the better score. The fact that it's in Happy Valley is a huge benefit. Again, goes back to the perfect schedule. I think we got a shot. Like I said, I think we have a better shot against Ohio State, but that could be a riveting game, one that the entire college football world has eyes on, especially if both teams are undefeated, and that will dictate, really, I think, who goes to the Big Ten Championship. If I had to point to one game, it's not Ohio State or Michigan. It's Penn State, Michigan, whatever week that is in the season. What is it, week 10, week 11? Week 11. Yeah, week 11 in the season. It's going to be awesome. Can't wait for that game. Then we got Rutgers. It's Rutgers. And then we go to Michigan State. Technically Ford Field. Very, very weird game. Black Friday, night game, Ford Field. I don't know what the hell is going on there. This will be a year for Michigan State to kind of get back on the right track, I believe. But they're not beating us. They're not beating us. They were a mess last year. They're going to put the pieces back together a little bit this year, but they're not going to make that much of a jump where they're going to be able to beat us. I think that we go into Ford Field, even on a short week, even though it's Black Friday and Thanksgiving and all that type of stuff. I think we win that game fairly handily. So that is overall the schedule. I obviously didn't break down like definitive win, 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 win. I would say the floor is 9-3. Credit to last year's team. Usually we have had a game every year under the Franklin era where we lose to a team we should not lose to. Obviously, we lose to Ohio State or we lose to Michigan, whatever. And then there's another game in there where it's like, why did we lose that game? We should have absolutely won. Last year's team did not have that. We knew we were going to lose to Ohio State. We knew we were going to lose to Michigan. But they took care of business and they dominated the rest of the way. So I am factoring in that one game this year, even though I don't think it's going to happen, that maybe things go wrong and we lose a game we're not supposed to. 9-3, that's why I say it. We lose to Ohio State, we lose to Michigan, and then one of those games where it doesn't make any sense. Ceiling, 12-0. The ceiling for Penn State this year is undefeated. The schedule is the main reason why, on top of the fact that we just have dudes, and it's the most loaded roster that we've had in the Franklin era. Getting a bye, and then UMass, and then Ohio State, and then having Ohio State and Michigan spaced out a little bit. There was one year, 2017, we had a gauntlet. We had Michigan, then on the road at Ohio State, and then on the road at Michigan State. It was incredibly difficult to go through that 3-game stretch. This year, there is no gauntlet. Not at all. It's a fairly easy schedule. It's constructed perfectly, and we can match up with these two teams, Ohio State and Michigan, that have largely been running the conference for the past decade plus. So 12-0 is what I have as the ceiling. 11-1, I would say, is my expectation. 11-1 is the standard, I would say. If we go 10-2 and we're losing to both Ohio State and Michigan, that is a major problem. And then we can start to have serious conversations, if we weren't having them already, about James Franklin. I've always been a James Franklin guy. I understand the fact that he got here during the sanctions. I understand the fact that even once those sanctions were lifted, it wasn't like they never existed. I understood that even though we had a lot of success with Saquon and Trace and Gesicki and Godwin and all them, we weren't built as a program yet to continue that success year in and year out. There were going to be ebbs and flows. Obviously, COVID came about, and it changed everything too. So I have given him passes that I think are justified. We're running out of those passes now. It's put up or shut up year for James Franklin. If we go 10-2, we're going to have problems. We're going to have problems because I'm no longer going to be able to defend him. This is supposed to be the year, and we'll just get into the coaching staff right now. This is the best coaching staff in the history of the program, ever. I said before, I tweeted out one time, I said, this is the best coaching staff that Penn State football has ever seen. And I had people in my reply saying, are you forgetting about Joe Paterno? And I'm like, no, dude. Like, individually, head coach, yes, Joe Paterno, by far the best coach that we've ever had. But in terms of top to bottom coaching staff, This is a different era of college football where guys are mobile and there's a bunch of turnover in staffs and there are constantly people on the market and you're trying to see who you could bring in. Who James Franklin has brought in, the list is incredible. I mean, first of all, Manny Diaz is the best hire he's ever made. That was a Saban-esque hire, in my opinion. I remember seeing that. Manny Diaz had just gotten fired from Miami a couple days before. And then all of a sudden we're hiring him to be defensive coordinator. It was such a smart move, such a ballsy move, but obviously has paid off and paid dividends. It was a big swing. Same goes for Mike Yurcich. We just brought in Kirk Shiraka. Throwback to that guy. He has a rough year, but granted, it's the COVID year. I could give him excuses and I could give him a pass. But James Franklin says, no, we're going to ditch him. We're going to get rid of him. And we're going to go for a guy in Mike Yurcich who's going to completely change the offense. And to his credit, he has. And now we're going to be at a stage where the offense is going to be incredibly good. The defense is going to be incredibly good. You look at all the position coaches, they have what seems like such a great chemistry, and they all are developing these players at such a high level, and they all cohesively work together. This is the best coaching staff that we've ever had. And going back to why 11-1 should be the standard and why we need to go 11-1, we cannot lose to both Ohio State and Michigan again. Who knows how long this staff is going to be around? Manny Diaz, it's a blessing that we have him for this year. There was a good chance that he was only here for a year and then he left to go take another head coaching job. He returned, I think, partially because he recognizes, oh, no, we're going to be insane. And I want to lead that defense. His head coaching stock is going to skyrocket after this year. But that means he probably won't be here next year. Yurcich doesn't strike me as that much of a charismatic head coach, but maybe he could find a head coaching job somewhere, or at the very least, he could get a better OC job somewhere. I don't know. I want to take advantage of what we have right now. And some people have said, oh, well, Drew Allar is only going to be a sophomore. We're going to have another year of him next year. Same with Singleton and Allen, all those guys. I'm like, no. You don't get it. We know what the layout of this year is. We know we have the best coaching staff that we've ever had. We know we have an incredibly beneficial schedule. And we know that we can match up with the top dogs in the conference. We need to take advantage of all of this. It's what you see with the Eagles right now in the NFL. Last year, the Eagles needed to win a Super Bowl because it wasn't going to get more perfect. Granted, they might come back this year. They're still going to be really solid. Obviously, they're going to win the division. They might make it back to the Super Bowl, but who knows? You leave it up to uncertainty. Last year, you knew the roster, the schedule, everything. The fact that you had players on rookie contracts and you could add pieces. You knew last year was the year, and you definitively needed to win that game. This year, Penn State needs to win 11 games or else it is a failure. It is an abject failure. So that is why I think 11-1 is the standard. That is why I think that is my prediction. Win every game you're supposed to win. And then in Ohio State and Michigan, when you face those teams, split one of the two. Again, I think Ohio State, we have the better chance of winning. But I wouldn't be shocked if we also could beat Michigan. That being said, if we're 11-1, do we go to the Big Ten Conference Championship? And do we go to the playoff? I don't know. That's a good question. We're in the best division in college football. 3 of the top 5 teams in college football this year could come from the Big Ten East. I think, like I said, it's going to come down to us versus Michigan. If we lose to Michigan, I think Michigan's going to be in the driver's seat to make it to the Big Ten Conference Championship game. And from there, they would most likely make it to the playoff. And you just have to hope, if we're 11-1 with our only loss coming to Michigan, that Georgia would be the only other team from the SEC making it in, that Alabama would fall off. Because let's face it, Georgia's schedule is BS. Georgia's schedule is such a joke. And they could go undefeated in the regular season, make it to the SEC championship game, lose that, and still make it into the playoff. 12-1, okay, yeah, they lose their conference championship game, whatever. They'll still make it to the playoff. You need to hope that they're the only representative of the SEC. You have to hope that neither Clemson or Florida State is as good as everybody says they are. I don't think they will be. And you have to hope that the Big 12 eats itself alive like it usually does. So if that's the case, all of that falls into play. Oh, also USC. You have to keep in mind USC. They might be around too. You have to hope that if you're 11-1, only lost to Michigan, things fall into the right place, because otherwise it's not a guarantee that you make it into the playoff, which that is also a goal. To make it into the playoff while it's still 4 teams. Obviously, once it moves to 12, we should have no problem getting in every year. But it would send such a good message, such a strong message to the college football world. Oh, yeah, we're here, one of the best 4 programs in the country this year, and we're about to go on a run with Drew Allar and these 2 running backs and this great defense. We're going to go on a run for the next 4 or 5 years. Watch out. It would be incredible for the program to make it in this final year of the 4-team playoff. And I obviously really hope that it happens, but we just got to see how it all shakes out in the Big Ten. Obviously, best pathway to get there is to win every single game and to control what you can control, but we might need some dominoes to fall. That's pretty much all I got in terms of expectations, predictions. I will say this season does have a lot of 93 in it. I mean, just right off the top of my head, it's the most athletes and the most depth that we've had since those teams in the early to mid-90s. But I say it's 93, 94 because 93 was the year where we kind of burst onto the scene, blew out Tennessee in the bowl game, and that was like a warning to the rest of college football. Watch out for what's to come next year. Then obviously 94, we have the undefeated season, the best Penn State team maybe ever. And I think this year is going to be very similar. I'm not saying it's going to be the best Penn State team ever, but the signs were out there last year. Penn State's coming, and I think this is going to be just an unbelievable year for the program. I do think we were close to getting there in 2017. We were close to getting there in 2020. People forget that 2019 team went 11-2, won a Cotton Bowl. Sean Clifford had a great first season as a starter. Journey Brown, Noah Cain, Devin Ford, Lawn Boys, one of the best running back rooms in the country. Wide receiver, 2019 was KJ Hamler. He kind of passed the baton off to Jahan Dotson. Tight end, Pat Freiermuth was one of the best tight ends, if not the best tight end in the country. And then on the defensive side of the ball, you had the best defender in the country, Micah Parsons. If that team comes out in 2020 in a non-COVID year with Ohio State at home that year, that's a completely different season. But instead, COVID hits. We're having to learn new offensive concepts over Zoom because we had to bring in Kirk Shiraka and have him implement his offense during the pandemic. We lose Journey Brown due to the heart condition. Noah Cain gets injured on the first drive of the game. Pat Freiermuth gets injured early on in the season. Micah Parsons opts out because of COVID. That was going to be the year. 2020 was going to be the year. This is where we're finally back to that after COVID. We're back to it now, and we're better than ever. We're better than what we were in 2017. We're better than what we were in 2019. This team has the potential to be the best team that James Franklin has ever rolled out, to really knock on the door of the playoff, and to make it very uncomfortable for the big boys of the conference. This Penn State team, I can't put into words how excited I am for it. I'm probably going to go to that first game, like I said, and I am going to be screaming my head off because this Penn State team, I just love already. I love it. Can't wait to see them play. That's pretty much all I got. I should think of a better ending for this, but that's pretty much all I had to say. Penn State football 2023, going to be a big year, 11-1, mark it. I can't guarantee a Big Ten championship or a playoff or whatever. We'll see how it all shakes out. But I hope to see you guys on Twitter. I hope to see you guys interacting throughout the course of the season. Thank you for listening. This has been a very, very long recording, and I know it's going to be a long episode. So if you stuck around this long, I really appreciate it. And we are, man. That's all I got to say. Connor Griffin signing off. We'll catch you next time.